I'm Peter Parker.
The MCU, a perfectly connected, geniusly made universe comprised of a large selection of films over the past 13 years or so. However, the universe is not perfect. Due to each movie being in the same universe, they all have to be connected. This idea by itself is not bad, however, because of this, it's hard for there to be a movie that is not connected to the other movies in some way. No matter what MCU movie you watch, it is rather obvious that it's related to the rest. However, at least this year, we've gotten some sort of independent stories in the MCU, including Eternals and Shang-Chi. Due to these two movies being rather independent stories, you don't need to watch the other movies to understand these. Just nice having a movie that's not fully connected to the rest of the universe, a standalone film, and especially Spider-Man movies should be standalone movies. And that is the biggest problem with MCU Spider-Man. Overall, MCU Spider-Man is fantastic. However, in a way, Spider-Man was Tony's replacement. Spider-Man was unable to have a chance to prove his worth on his own without Iron Man's legacy / mentorship interfering with that. Even Vulture and Mysterio, the two villains from Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming, are closely related to Tony Stark. Sure, Iron Man's an amazing character, but he should not be this closely related with Spider-Man. One of the most appealing parts about the character is how relatable he is. Due to his heavy relation with Iron Man, he is supplied with like million-dollar tech. And this is highly unrealistic for a simple high schooler to have, which makes him a lot more unrelatable. Spider-Man is just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, after all. The simpler, the better. Despite the tech being awesome, Spider-Man is, simply put it, not Iron Man.
You serious?
However, this connectivity with the rest of the MCU isn't the only problem with MCU Spider-Man. Some of the other characters, like Aunt May, can also be a problem. Well, Aunt May is super nice, friendly, and overall, she's like a mother figure to Peter. Almost like a moral compass. And this version of Aunt May perfectly conveys the friendly, the kind, the mother-like figure. However, she's not really a moral compass. It's really a shame considering the previous two versions of Aunt May in Amazing Spider-Man and the Sam Raimi trilogy really served as a moral compass, being a good influence. That's it.
My last visit.
Pish posh, we needn't talk about it. It's water over the dam or under the bridge or wherever you like it, but you made a brave move in telling me the truth, and I'm proud of you. And I thank you, and I love you, Peter.
Despite these serious flaws with the MCU Spider-Man, I'm happy to say No Way Home fixes these problems and delivers an unforgettable experience. This movie delivers an unforgettable experience that fixes previous errors, shows a unique tale that rivals any other superhero or regular movie in existence. Firstly, Peter Parker develops as a character. Peter wants everyone to forget who Spider-Man is because it is affecting his life terribly, along with his friends. So he goes to Doctor Strange and sees if he can cast a spell removing everyone's knowledge of who Spider-Man is. However, he still wants some of his friends to know that he's Spider-Man. So Peter ends up talking too much, altering the spell, which leads to multiple villains from other universes coming to theirs. Peter acts selfishly, wanting his life and his friends' lives to be better. The consequences don't really matter to him. He wants his life to be better. After Aunt May dies, however, he realizes how badly he messed up. These scenes, by the way, offer a great side of Peter, a darker, sadder side. And that rain sequence in particular was just phenomenal. Seeing him mourning, regretful. Towards the end, he is willing to sacrifice the very thing he strived for in the beginning, plus his friends' and family's love and knowledge of his existence. He went from making a horrible, selfish mistake to sacrificing the greatest parts of life for a life where no one even knew him. This is a very compelling and a heroic arc, really showing the character develop. Aunt May is also great in this movie, serving as a mentor figure to him. She even said the famous Uncle Ben line.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
This film is also a Spider-Man focused film, not a Spider-Iron Man focused film. They barely even mentioned Iron Man in this film. I don't even remember if they mentioned him. Rather than relying on Tony's tech and skills, he relied on his allies and on his wits. This trend should continue, considering now he has officially no connection to Tony Stark, and we even got to see his new homemade suit, which looks great, by the way. He's even now living in a cheap, ragged apartment. This film basically sets up the newer, simpler Spider-Man, kind of like an origin story. Aunt May is the Uncle Ben of this trilogy. Her death motivates Peter to change his direction for the better. Her death inspires Peter to become more selfless by willing to sacrifice everyone's knowledge of his existence for the better of the world. For Spider-Man, the simpler, the better. The film was also able to fix the mistakes of the previous non-MCU related Spider-Man movies. No Way Home showed that it is perfectly possible to balance many villains, in a good way. That was arguably the biggest flaw with Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Each villain gets their moment to shine, and some are further developed and even better than this film. We got to see more of Octavius, not being controlled by his robotic tentacles, a nicer side of him, which was great. Alfred Molina is just so iconic in the role. This was a great side to see more of. We even got to see more of the brilliant Willem Dafoe, reprising his role as Norman Osborn. This movie showed us the twisted, split personality of him perfectly. He is so brilliant as Green Goblin, perfectly acting both sides. His insanity really showed us a darker side of the MCU. Like, I heard a lot of people even saying they hated him in this movie. In a good way, because of how evil and menacing he was. I mean, come on. He was almost responsible for the death of Toby. Electro was also further explored, showing us not only a more powerful version, but also a more powerful person mentally. I always thought he was intriguing, and this further develops the character. He is quite egotistical, wanting attention, even craving it. He came from being almost invisible to being extremely powerful. This power allowed him to be seen. People started paying attention. Plus, Jamie Foxx is just hilarious in the role. The rest of the villains are also great, but not the standouts for me. This movie was also so entertaining throughout. There was not one boring part. The pacing went from super fast in the beginning of the film to a steady but concentrated pace. The story was moving along flawlessly, with special care towards the halfway point. Arguably, the second half is a lot better than the first half, but that's saying something, because the first half is also amazing. I like how the first half deals primarily with setting up the story and also following the cliffhanger of Far From Home. We see an inside perspective into Peter's life and basically see how bad his life is. We see how ill others treat him, how awkward it is for him. Both his lives and his friends' lives are being ruined. This part of the film allows us to feel for the character and understand why he would take an incredibly large risk in order for everyone to forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. But in the second half, it gets even better. Seriously, after Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield showed up, it just got 10 times better. Both actors were just phenomenal in the role, and I believe they both deserved better. Both had canceled movies, which could have helped to develop the characters further. I also just like all the references they made to the other films. Like that reference to Rhino just cracked me up.
My back! Oh, my back!
As they compared the villains they fought, it was also really easy to notice that Andrew Garfield deserved more. The three Spider-Man also had great chemistry, like a brother bond. They were just great. After I heard the rumors that they would be in this film, I thought they would appear for like a brief cameo, but oh boy was I wrong. They literally had almost 30 minutes of screen time. They actually had a stake in the plot, helping to motivate Peter in his most hopeless state. Even Charlie Cox reprises his role as Matt Murdock from Daredevil, who although appeared for like only a minute, helped to push the story further, helping Peter with legal challenges, and even give him hope by explaining to him that he shouldn't be concerned about the pending litigations because the case against him has no real merit. He even catches a brick that flies through the window with minimal movement or exertion. Peter is shocked by this and asks him how he was able to do that. And he just responds with, "I'm a good lawyer." And that's just funny. And I'm sure we'll see more of Matt Murdock in the MCU. This movie definitely contained a lot of nostalgic elements, which were also great to see. I mean, hearing the Danny Elfman Spider-Man score was just great. This movie really had no boring elements. I mean, let's be honest, the fight scenes were just amazing, especially the showdowns between each Spider-Man and their corresponding villain. These fights contained Spider-Man moves and takedowns, which were just so iconic. It was so satisfying to see all three of them web sling together. And the performances were also just fantastic. Tobey Maguire, I believe, is a standout. I always believed he was a great actor, but this is the best Spider-Man performance of his in my books. Zendaya, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland were also great. All the actors were just so great, and the villains were just especially menacing. Once again, in particular, Green Goblin. I also thought the jokes were actually evenly placed throughout the film. I quite enjoy MCU humor, but I personally don't like it when they ruin emotional scenes that would be much better without the jokes. The jokes were also just especially funny, and the side characters were great. Ned was really good and funny, and especially he should get a lot of credit. I mean, come on, he brought Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire into a Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland. Ah, that's awesome. Ned was really good and funny, and I'm happy he got more love this movie. He's an absolute legend after all. MJ and Ned were just portrayed as two great friends, helping Peter in any way they can. This movie is just an almost perfect movie. In summary, this movie is great because it brought back characters and moments that felt so nostalgic to both younger and older audiences. It was everything that everyone wanted in a Spider-Man movie. It literally felt like a dream. The performance of Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin was immaculate. Tom Holland's Peter Parker finally became Spider-Man instead of Iron Man's sidekick. A great, perfectly flowing story. Everyone was entertained for the entire movie. There are literally no parts of the movie where you are bored. It somehow managed to exceed everyone's already ginormous expectations. Most action-packed Marvel movies ever. Tom Holland's acting was also amazing, and his character finally developed and matured. There were nostalgic, heartwarming moments that reconnected characters, while nostalgic music was playing. Best fight scenes in a Marvel movie with classic Spider-Man takedowns. This movie is not just a great Spider-Man movie, nor just a great movie. This film is a cinematic masterpiece that's definitely worth watching. 9.8 out of 10. Definitely worth the watch, and I'm going to be watching this over and over again. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great one. See ya.